Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again this week. We are excited to bring on tonight an incredible speaker. I want to introduce everybody to my dear friend Ria Story. So this is Ria. When we were up at the U.S. Capitol a few weeks ago, Ria was there with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. She's going to probably share a little bit about her story, but really, this is an interview. This is a chance for you all to get to know some of the people in the industry, those who are on the front lines every day as survivor leaders. And really, Ria, what I'd love is for you to maybe just start with a little bit about who you are. I know that you hate ironing, so we agree on that. So that's good. And if you can't keep plants alive and you burn pancakes, I think we're best friends for life.
I absolutely cannot keep plants alive, so there we go. And if I burn pancakes, I throw them away so nobody knows. That's the
I love it.
secret. That's the secret. Yeah, it's such a privilege to be here with you, Brittany. Thanks for just the invitation to join you. And the event at the U.S. Capitol was incredible. To me, I think one of the things that makes Safe House Project special is that you really have a vision, and it's a pretty big vision, the concept or the hope or the vision that we can eradicate child sex trafficking in by 2030. And that's an incredible vision. And and I don't remember who said it, but a quote comes to mind that says, "Those who think they can change the world are the ones that do." And I think that's what's inspiring is when we meet people who just say, you know what, it might be a big vision, it might be a huge vision, but the ones who think they can do it are the ones that do achieve it. So yeah, thanks for having me tonight.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. So Laura or Ria, sorry, I got something else in my head. Ria, Ria really comes to us because she has a breadth of expertise. Her and her husband, they are leaders in our community. They both have their own stories that brought them to a position of really leading people and having an impact on communities. They just got back from Ohio, and we're up there just training people and talking about leadership. How do we lead? But a huge part of figuring out how we effectively lead others is coming to, I don't want to say coming to terms, because that's not what I mean, but more of embracing our past, and processing that and then moving forward. So do you just want to give us a little snapshot of your past and where that kind of brought you, and then we'll go forward into more what you're doing today?
Sure. I was raised on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, and very isolated from society. We didn't go to church, we didn't go to school. I was homeschooled. And, while religion was very much a part of my home, it was not used in a good way. And when I was 12, my dad started sexually abusing me, and that progressed as I got older. And by the time I was 17, he was regularly, having sex with me and would bargain with me for sexual favors in exchange for something like a night out with my friends. And he always was saying he wanted to give me the ultimate experience, and that looked like a lot of different things. Tying me up and beating me with a riding crop, which is something you whip horses with, and taking nude photographs of me, and eventually that led to trafficking me to others with men he would meet on the internet and arrange meetings with these men. And you know that was a dark time of life for me because I didn't see that I'd ever get out. I ran away from home a few times, and dad would always find me and bring me back, and I didn't see any options. I had no high school diploma, certainly no job skills, no job, no money, no. And even though I had a few family, friends and family, and a lot of people suspected that things weren't right. Um, They could see signs. I was dressed in inappropriate clothing at Christmas dinner, and I would sit on dad's lap, even at 16 years old, way beyond the edge of that's appropriate behavior. Um, but no one really wanted to get involved. No one ever wanted to ask the questions or talk about it. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, is because a lot of us think of child sex trafficking as something that's happening in a great big city, and people being imported from other countries, and that's true, but it's also happening in smaller communities and families, and sometimes it is, unfortunately, parents. And until we're willing to get involved and ask those questions and have those conversations, I think it's really tough to get to the root of the issue. So I left home at 19. I met what I call my knight in a shiny Camaro. Um, and I mean, he's now my husband of almost 19 years, but we've long since traded the car. But he was the first person to ever ask me, "Hey, is this what's going on? Like, I'm seeing some signs, I'm seeing some things that aren't right." And he was the first person to ever ask, and he was really the one that gave me the courage to leave and stay gone. I'd tried a few times and couldn't stay, because there's so much emotional bondage that goes on with a situation like that, and that's as much or more difficult to overcome as the physical results or impact. And but I'm incredibly fortunate, that I did have a knight in a shiny Camaro who turned out to be really my champion, and helping me just grow and grow into who I needed to be. And he didn't know at the time we would end up together and getting married and all of that. But when I left home, I didn't have anything much. I didn't have a job or money. I remember I snuck back into my house, and I made my best friend go with me, and we really snuck in, and because I was afraid to tell my parents I was leaving. I was afraid to face them. And so, I mean, literally, she was helping me stuff clothes in a pillowcase and a couple of duffel bags, and we snuck back out of the house, and that was it. That's what I had. And you know, the only job I could find at the time was working as a waitress at Pizza Hut, and I was back then, way back, long time ago. Um, I was waiting tables for $2.13 an hour, plus tips. And that's not a whole lot of money to pick up half-eaten pizza crusts off the floor and bust dirty tables. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I was proud to get it because it was mine, and I was determined to be independent. But it didn't take me long to realize that, number one, I didn't want the rest of my life to stay there. It's not what I wanted to do. That's not the job of your dreams, or it wasn't the job of mine. And I realized that it wasn't going to find me, and I could spend the rest of my life using what happened to me as an excuse, or I could just say, you know what, I can be better because of it. And I'm a big fan of saying, we don't choose what happens to us in life, but we choose how we respond to it.
No, and everything about you emanates that. The way that you all approach life, the way that you and Mac work with one another, you all show just deep respect and love for one another. And it is incredible to see how, despite your past, despite things that have happened, that you would never choose or wish upon anybody, that you all have become closer together, and that been a support system. I mean, it's truly inspirational to watch you all and just hear your story and hear your heart. I think one of the things that most people don't realize is that we have such a huge percentage of kids that are trafficked by family members. I mean, 40% of the kids that we come in contact with are trafficked by a family member. What would be your message around those, either to those who might suspect something that's happening to that family member's child, and they're not saying anything currently, but maybe should? Or what is kind of your advice to those who are looking in from a kind of close distance?
I think that the best advice I could give, there has to be trust in any relationship when we start asking those kind of questions, because no one ever did ask me, but I don't know what I would have said if they had, but I guarantee you, if I didn't trust that person, I wouldn't have said much of anything, because there's so much shame and fear, and as bad as it sounds, fear of the unknown. If I do say something, what happens? And especially when it's a family member, you as strange as it sounds, you care about that person, and you don't want to see them harmed, even though there's so much guilt and shame in the situation, but you don't want to necessarily see them come to grief for it. And so it's very conflicted, and that's kind of the dichotomy that allows so many perpetrators to get away with it. So I think the best advice that if you see something or suspect something, I would say, number one, work on the trust in that relationship with that child or teenager, and if nothing else, be willing to listen. That might look like just establishing a relationship and just saying, hey, I'm here, I'm a safe place. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about habit number 5 is seek first to understand. And he talks about empathic listening. And that's hard for us as people, because many times when we ask a teenager a question or something, we get a yes or no answer. And so it kind of shuts down the dialogue. But when we can truly learn to listen empathically to not just the words that are said, but the feelings behind them, the emotions, what's not being said. And that's true in any relationship, but I think it's especially critical when we're talking about something so sensitive and so painful and shameful. Listening skills are an incredible tool to just open up dialogue and establish trust. And so that's the number one thing I would say for anyone is learn to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, frequently, like our survivors will tell us that they didn't even identify as a victim because the trauma bond is so strong when it comes to familial trafficking. It's not something that is easy to not just even talk about, but even frame in a way that people would understand that there is a love there, and especially when it starts at an early age, that it develops. And I think that's important to understand, that it isn't going to be something that is a switch overnight all the time that
Mm-hmm.
allows for a child to come forward about that, but it is that who can they trust to really um, to listen, as you said, and invest a little bit of that extra time. I think that's really important. I mean, and whether it's escalated to a situation of sexual abuse or home violence, like there's just a lot of ways that our kids are experiencing harsh realities within the home. And so, how can we help vulnerable kids
Mm-hmm.
before it even gets to that stage? I think is also really key.
Yeah.
And so when it also, one of the other things that's always interesting to notice, just that desperate need is when you do try to run away, and the fact that there aren't a lot of resources available.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where did you see the biggest gaps as you tried? I know that you mentioned a little bit on the economic empowerment side. What else did you really acutely feel as you were trying to leave that situation?
Um, well, it's been obviously quite a few years ago, and so things are probably a little different. Back then there was the internet, but it wasn't as freely accessible. You certainly didn't have a cell phone with the internet in the palm of your hand, kind of thing. And I had no idea that there were resources available. I mean, when you grow up, and in my case, in a sheltered environment, I had no idea there were, even crisis houses for domestic, but I had no concept of those things because I'd never been exposed to them. But even if I had known about them, I wouldn't have known how to go about getting in touch with them. So I think that some of that particular gap is better now, just because the information that most of us have is so much more accessible, and that's a good thing. It was interesting. I saw a Facebook meme the other day that someone had an idea for putting posters up in physician offices, particularly like OBGYN offices and things, and just said, you know what, if you feel like you're in danger in any way, use the red marker. If you think things are fine, use the black marker. But if you use the red marker, we will ask to just have a private interview with you alone and ask whoever's with you to step out so you can talk with us privately.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's so cool, just because it just gives them a safe way to say, hey, I do feel like maybe there's something going on here, or I do want to talk to someone privately, but I don't want to tell the person who brought me here or who's with me, or, or for whatever, whoever it is. Um, so I see some things like that really have helped cross that gap. And I can remember even after I left home, and the few people in my circle who knew suggested, oh, well, you should go get counseling and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I don't have any idea how to do that. And it was literally like open the phone book. Like back then we had phone books and yellow pages, and look up like counselors, and I would call them and kind of get bounced around. And so, it took a couple of weeks before I really was able to figure that out. And so I think that that's better. I definitely I see that as still being a potential barrier for people. Because again, all the information in the world isn't great and going to help us unless we know how to access it. But I'm seeing a lot of great efforts in that. In the airports, you see the signs in the bathroom and that kind of thing. The biggest gap, I think, is that victims, like you said, don't often identify as victims. I mean, I wouldn't have called what was happening to me trafficking. I mean, I didn't know such a word existed. And so I think that's the biggest hurdle, is because the victims all often don't enough identify as a victim.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring up the signage in the airports and the signage in the doctor's office, because there was a HuffPost article written, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, about awareness. And it was saying that the awareness campaigns of the anti-human trafficking industry are ineffective and they're painting the wrong picture. And in some ways, I was like, what? And then in other ways, I was like, you're right. With only 4% being objection, I'm not as worried about the white panel van, coming down the street, or the supermarket parking lot when it comes to my kids, as it is who are the trust relationships that I am putting around them, who are the caretakers, who are those that, we're a military family. We move into a new town, and you're asking a whole bunch of people, like, who can babysit? Like, who can help? And those are the precautions and the steps that we need to take, is to know who are we entrusting with our kids on that next level of interaction. But I think it made some good points about where the anti-trafficking industry can go in terms of more accurately painting a picture of the issue. So if you had your ideal awareness campaign, and you could say something to the world, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to an awareness campaign, I think number one, I think most of us don't learn how to develop our character. And what I mean by that is, our character is who we are. It determines what we do. And Dr. Henry Cloud says our character is the ability to meet the demands of reality. And so if we are able to develop our character as individuals, so that when we do encounter problems, because we are, whether it's child sex trafficking or abuse or just hardship in life, you lose your job, you go through a divorce. If we are focusing on our efforts on building character in our young people, so that when they face the challenges of life, they know how to respond to that and the way that best fits them. Because we can't, there's not a one size fits all for every problem. so I think if we were to focus our awareness on developing those character building skills, and we don't talk about that a lot. We send our kids to school and we teach competency math and English, and we need that. Those are critical skills. Um, but we don't really talk about the things that really contribute to most of our success in life, or most of our ability to be resilient in life. Things like, how can, when I face a problem, how do I identify and focus on what I can control in this situation? I was speaking to a group of child sex trafficking survivors just last week, and one young lady, she was just having a meltdown, really. And I asked her, what was wrong, and she said, what, I've learned that I'm going into a foster situation instead of staying with a family member. And and it's devastating at that age to know that you're going into a foster. It's just so much that she cannot control. But you know in any situation we find ourselves in, if we focus on what we can control and do that, we find we can become more resilient. So I think my ideal awareness campaign starts really even before we get to that situation or that problem. If we'll help empower individuals, that's why I get so excited about it, is because, in any of my career jobs, I have a couple of degrees, but no one ever talked about, how do I as an individual be resilient and overcome adversity? And we don't really teach those things. So that's kind of what my version of awareness would be, is start even before there's a problem and empower people with those skills, because that's empowerment. Being able to teach them how to live life.
Right? You mean parent?
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to prevention is the best way to eradicate anything. It's before it starts. We know at this point in the trajectory of trafficking in the United States, we need treatment and prevention to eradicate it. But in the long run, we really want to move to a prevention model where we can help empower our youth to understand consent, to understand respect, to understand boundaries, to be able to say no when something does make them uncomfortable, and to have the voice to speak it. And I think that you're right. It's about how do we cultivate the characteristics that will really raise up a generation of leaders, and ones that everybody wants to truly follow because there's a good intention behind it, not because it's just hard. So, no, I love that. Let's hear a little bit about what you and Mac do now. I'd love to have you be able to highlight the work that you all do, the way that you empower leaders in all areas of business. And I know that you work more on the corporate side, but then you also work a lot with different nonprofits, and you guys just are out there with an incredible mission to that end, to build resiliency, to build leaders, and to really impact culture.
Yeah, we're incredibly fortunate or blessed, if what's your term of choice, but we kind of have his mind and ours. Mac focuses his empowerment, if you want to call it that, but he is passionate about developing the blue collar workforce. And he's passionate about that because he was a member of the blue collar workforce, and he realizes that we have a lot of leadership things and leadership books and things like that, but there again, are we really teaching every individual that the choices they make in the end can determine a lot of their success in life, personally and professionally? And then a lot of times, if we'll focus on our character and developing ourselves, then that solves a lot of our problems. And so that's really where his passion is. And then I focus kind of in a slightly same message, but different target. I really like to focus on women, leadership for women, because I think, it, there again, no one ever talked to me about how to influence people, how to be successful, how to overcome problems in here in life. And we all have problems, it's just a fact of life. And so I really get fired up about helping people understand that the choices they make and their dimensions of life can not control everything or not even affect everything, but it can help you overcome problems. The choices that I make and whether to grow myself mentally and develop myself and read books and learn raises my level of awareness. So when I do encounter a roadblock, I know how to navigate it. And all of those things, help determine our influence. And influence is something we all want. We want to influence people. You think of any time when you were mad or sad or upset or frustrated, it's never because you had too much influence, whether it's your 5-year-old or your husband or your boss at work. We all want more influence. And so Mac and I both like to talk about, well, how do we get more influence? Because we don't talk about it a lot. But most of the time we speak together, whether it's a blue collar, leadership training in the corporate world, or a different event, or on stage at a conference, because the same principles apply. How we talk about them and the stories we share would look different. But the principles are kind of like gravity. They apply to everybody. It's just that when we learn to work with them, we can use them more effectively and leverage them. So, yeah. And, I think we were in 40 states last year. So we're just incredibly blessed to be excited about what we're doing, and really, I tell people I retired a long time ago, because retirement is when you quit doing work and you start doing what you were love to do, what you're called to do. And for me, sharing my story of overcoming, and it gives me purpose, because it was a terrible thing that happened to me. It's unfortunately not that uncommon, but if I can just help one other person realize that what happens to us in life doesn't have to define the rest of our life, that takes a bad thing, and in my case turns it into a very positive thing. And that is a calling. And when I tell people I walked out of a great career to pursue this, and it wasn't easy, at first, to build up a business and do this for a living, but it's been the most rewarding time of life. And every day is a gift, to wake up excited about what you're doing, and how can I just add value to people today. That might look like sharing my story. I'm pretty much almost everywhere we speak, I do. Whether that's a corporate event, or even we did a blue collar leadership training yesterday, and I touch on it, because we all go through adversity. It's just a matter of how do we deal with it.
I love that. No, and you're so right. And I love that you all bring it back to the idea that, yes, this is a really hard issue, and it's one that, that we need to tackle head on, and we need to, empower these kids to have a pathway to freedom. But there are other challenges in this world that really come against us, and that there's a lot of issues out there, and it's not limited in scope. Like, life can be really hard. And so whatever that is, do you respond? How do you, lead from a place of positivity to some degree, and increase your sphere of influence in a way that really impacts and change, and really helps people believe in who they are and find that deeper level of self. Just because those medals, you have to tell us about your medals. I know that you talked about it a little bit beforehand. I mean, you're a woman of grit and perseverance and determination, and I love all of those things about you, but you do it with heart and passion. And so I need the whole world to know how many medals are maybe on you.
I don't even know. Some of them are from bike racing, not mountain bike racing, and not because I was any good at mountain bike racing. I just discovered that if you keep pedaling, and if you get back up after you crash, and you just keep going, a lot of times you can win the race. And that's kind of what happened with me in mountain bike racing. And I'm still not any good at it, but I learned if I just don't quit. And I would love to write a book one day on life lessons from a mountain bike, because I learned so much about, just don't give up. And a lot of them are from running, and I'm probably, the medals are more about being better for myself. And I grew up, my dad always made fun of me for any athletic attempts. And I always heard growing up through as a child and as a teenager that I was clumsy and shouldn't attempt to do anything physical, and that I couldn't run. And I kind of had that as a limiting belief for many years. And in 2008, I started teaching group fitness, and that gave me such a sense of empowerment and control over myself. And I started to think, well, you know what, maybe I could do a little something. And so I started, running a little bit, and then running. I really had to hire a coach to help me learn how to run. I wasn't any good at it. But last year I ran I think my 8th marathon, and I qualified to run the Boston Marathon. And for me, that's an incredible accomplishment. Not that I'll ever win a marathon race like that, but it's taught me so much about not giving up and being resilient. And I think those lessons translate. And so I'm a big fan of it today, because if we learn to be resilient in one dimension of our life, that translates and helps us be more resilient in another area of life. And I think that was a big part of my growth, just growing in my physical confidence and physical abilities, and that helped me mentally as well. So yeah, the medals are, one of my friends gave me that medal hanger, and she was over not too long ago. She's like, I need to get you another one. It's filling up. And I said, you know what, I'm just incredibly fortunate to have figured that part out, but it's been a big part of my growth.
Well, I love that. And I think it just goes back to the whole idea that you need to be healthy in all areas of your life. And, putting out stretch goals, whether it's, in athletics or in health or in personal development and growth, or spiritually, whatever that is that helps you kind of keep moving, is just so important to really finding that deep, lasting joy and purpose. And I think that's what you do in all areas of your life. And I'm just so thankful that you were able to join us this evening. And for myself,
Absolutely.
I know my counterpart was sick tonight, so thank you for bearing with us. But no, we really just appreciate you. We appreciate your heart and just the partnership, because we know that there is so much work to be done, and your voice is just one that resonates with people, and we love the hope that you bring to a really hard issue. So thank you for being part of this tonight, and we just look forward to whatever else is in store.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you, Brittany. And yeah, thanks for what you do.
Thanks.